The man on television was crying, and Claire Donovan couldn't look away. She was standing in her kitchen in Charlotte, North Carolina, still in her work clothes, a half-eaten bowl of soup going cold on the counter. And there he was on the evening news, a man in an expensive charcoal suit, standing at the entrance of the Brookfield Transit Center downtown, his jaw trembling as he tried to hold himself together in front of the cameras. His name, the anchor said, was Thomas Whitfield, 61 years old, founder of Whitfield Medical Group, one of the most respected private healthcare networks in the Carolinas, a man who had everything. And yet there he was, begging. "I will pay whatever reward is asked," Thomas said, his voice cracking on the last word. "I don't care about the money inside the case. You can keep every dollar. I just need what's in the inside pocket, please." He paused, composing himself with visible effort, pressing one hand briefly to his mouth before lowering it. "Those documents belong to my son, and my son is gone, and they're all I have left of him." Claire set down her spoon. She walked slowly toward the television and stood there in her socks on the hardwood floor, watching the clip replay as the anchor summarized what had happened. Thomas Whitfield's leather briefcase had been taken from the Brookfield Transit Center 3 days ago. He'd stepped away from his seat for less than 4 minutes. When he returned, the briefcase was gone. Inside was $10,000 in cash, his phone, 2 credit cards, a laptop, and tucked into the interior silk pocket, a sealed envelope containing the last letter his son Daniel had ever written. Daniel Whitfield, 28 years old, had died 14 months ago in a car accident on Interstate 85. Thomas had carried that letter everywhere since the funeral. He'd never opened it. He said he wasn't ready yet. He just needed to know it was still there. Claire turned off the television. She walked to her bedroom closet, pushed aside a row of hanging blouses, and pulled out a leather briefcase she had found on a bench at Brookfield Transit Center 3 days ago. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Claire Donovan was 39 years old, a contracts administrator for a mid-sized construction firm, and she was not a thief. She needed people to understand that. She had been telling herself that for 3 days, standing in front of this closet, her hand pressed flat against the door like she could keep something from escaping. She had found the briefcase on a transit center bench. She had looked around. She had waited. She had taken it to the information desk and asked if anyone had reported a lost item. The woman behind the counter had taken her name and number, nodded politely, and said she'd make a note. Claire had waited another 20 minutes. Then her bus had come and she had to make a decision. She told herself she was just taking it home temporarily. She would call in the morning. She would figure out who it belonged to. She had not meant for 3 days to pass. But then she had opened the briefcase. She hadn't been able to help herself. She was only going to look for identification, she told herself. She was going to find an owner's card, a business card, something with a name and a number, and she'd make one call and be done with it. Instead, she found $10,000 in cash, neatly banded, and that changed something in her chest. Not greed exactly, more like fear. Fear of what it meant to have found it, fear of what people would think. Fear that if she called right now, someone might not believe she hadn't taken anything. She had told herself she'd wait a day, let it settle, think clearly. And then she'd found the envelope. It was cream-colored, the kind used for formal correspondence, tucked inside the silk pocket with the careful precision of someone who had placed it there deliberately, who opened and checked for it often. It wasn't sealed with tape. Just the original envelope glue, aged and slightly loose at one corner. She had held it up to the light and seen the shadow of pages inside. She had not opened it. She didn't know why she was suddenly so certain about that one boundary when she had already crossed so many others. But she set it back exactly as she had found it and closed the briefcase and put it in the closet. Then she had spent 3 days not calling anyone and hatting herself quietly in the evenings. Now there was a man on the news who was crying about his dead son. Claire sat on the edge of her bed and thought about her own father, who had died 6 years ago, and about a voicemail she had deleted by accident the week after the funeral. His voice saying, "Call me back when you get a chance. Honey, nothing urgent." And how she still thought about those words sometimes in the middle of the night, the unbearable casualness of them, the way he had assumed there would be time. She picked up her phone. She almost called the non-emergency police line. Then she stopped. Then she looked up the Whitfield Medical Group and found the main switchboard number and put the phone down again and sat there for another hour. The problem she was beginning to realize was that she was ashamed, not just of having kept the briefcase, of the 3 days, of the fact that this man had been on television, crying, and she had been 20 minutes away, watching. She could call right now and return everything, and nothing in the briefcase had been touched, and it would be fine. That was probably true. But there was something else, something that had been growing quietly in the back of her mind since she first saw Thomas Whitfield on that screen. Her younger brother Kevin had stolen from her once. Not money, nothing you could report to police. He had borrowed her car for a weekend 14 years ago and come back with a dent in the rear panel and a made-up story about a parking lot, and she had known it was a lie, and he had known she knew, and they had never spoken about it. The dent was still there. The lie had never been addressed, and something had calcified between them after that, something small but permanent, like a crack in ceramic that holds even after the glue dries. She had spent years believing that the defining thing about that story was what Kevin had done. She was starting to wonder if she had been wrong. She picked up her phone again. She found the number. She pressed call before she could stop herself. It rang 4 times. A woman answered, professional and measured, identifying herself as the Whitfield Medical Group after-hours service. "I need to speak with Thomas Whitfield," Claire said. "My name is Claire Donovan. I have his briefcase." There was a pause. "Ma'am, can you hold for just one moment?" She held. She sat on the edge of her bed and listened to silence on the line and thought about the letter in the silk pocket and about Daniel Whitfield, 28 years old, and about all the things people leave behind for the people who aren't ready yet. Thomas Whitfield came on the line in under 90 seconds. His voice was not what she expected. It was quiet and very still, the way voices go when a person has been in crisis long enough that they've gone past the shaking stage and into something harder and more internal. "Ms. Donovan," he said. "Mr. Whitfield, I found your briefcase at the transit center. I want to return it. I want you to know that nothing has been removed. The envelope is there. I didn't open it." Another silence. She heard him breathing. "Where are you?" he asked. She gave him her address. He said he would send someone within the hour. She said she would be there. He said thank you in a voice that was barely a word at all, more like an exhale, and then the call ended and Claire sat in her quiet apartment with the briefcase on the bed beside her and felt the particular, uncomfortable weight of something that cannot be taken back. The man Thomas sent was not a driver or an assistant. It was Thomas himself. He arrived 45 minutes later in a dark blue sedan, no driver, no security. He was taller than he looked on television. He was wearing a different suit now, no tie, and he looked like someone who had not slept properly in a very long time. He stood in the doorway of her apartment building lobby and accepted the briefcase from her hands with both of his, the way you receive something fragile, and he held it against his chest for a moment with his eyes closed. Claire stood back and gave him that. When he opened his eyes, he said, "I'd like to give you the reward." "I don't want a reward," she said. He looked at her steadily. "What you did tonight took something." She looked away. "What I did 3 days ago took something too." He was quiet for a moment. "I know," he said. "I know it wasn't 3 days ago that you decided to call. I know it was tonight when you saw the news." She felt heat in her face. "I'm sorry, I should have." "Ms. Donovan," he said her name gently, "can I tell you something about my son?" She nodded. Daniel was not a simple person, Thomas said. He looked down at the briefcase in his hands. He was stubborn and he made mistakes, and there was a period of about 4 years where we barely spoke. He had his reasons and I had mine, and neither of us were entirely right or entirely wrong about any of it. He paused. The letter inside this case, I know what it probably says. I know because his sister told me the broad strokes before she thought better of it. It says he forgave me. And it says he hoped I'd stop being so hard on people. Thomas looked up. I've been carrying it for 14 months without opening it because I'm not sure I've earned it yet. Claire had nothing to say to that. But I needed to know it was still there, he said. That's all, that's what I needed. He thanked her again simply and walked back to his car. Claire stood in the lobby doorway until his taillights disappeared around the corner. Then she went upstairs and sat at her kitchen table in the dark for a long while, not doing anything, just sitting. She called Kevin the next morning. Not about the dent, not about the lie. She just called to say she was thinking about him, which was true, and asked if he wanted to have lunch sometime, which she meant. He said yeah, he'd like that. He sounded surprised. She thought that was probably fair. 3 weeks later, Thomas Whitfield opened the letter. Claire didn't know this directly. She read it in the Charlotte Observer, a small feature that ran on a Tuesday, not on the front page, buried inside the local section next to an ad for a furniture store. The writer had spoken with Thomas briefly, and he'd offered only one quote. He said that the letter was everything he expected and nothing he deserved, and that he'd spent 3 weeks deciding he was finally ready, and that what made him ready, strangely enough, was a woman he barely knew who had called him on a Tuesday night and said, "I have your briefcase, and nothing inside has been touched." He said he figured if a stranger could find her way back to the right thing, so could he. Claire read the article twice. Then she cut it out of the paper and folded it neatly and slid it into an envelope. She wrote Kevin's name on the front. She did not write a note inside. She thought he would understand. She thought that was the kind of thing that didn't need explaining, the kind of thing that lands differently in the quiet when there are no cameras, no newscasters, no reward being offered. Just the weight of something given back before it was too late. She put a stamp on the envelope and walked it to the mailbox at the end of her street and let it go. A month later, Claire got a single text from a number she didn't recognize. I opened it this morning. It said what I knew it would say. I think I was always ready. I just needed someone to show me what ready looks like. T. Whitfield. She read it twice, standing in the parking lot of her office building with her keys in her hand. Then she sat down on a nearby bench, not because she was tired, just because she needed to be still for a moment. She thought about the 3 days, about the closet door she kept pressing her hand against, about the way shame can masquerade as caution for so long you forget they aren't the same thing. She typed back, "I'm glad you opened it. I'm glad it was what you needed." She put her phone away. She sat for another minute in the ordinary afternoon traffic passing, pigeons on the pavement, the whole indifferent city moving around her. Then she stood up, and she went back to her life, and it was smaller than Thomas Whitfield's life and quieter, and she thought that was exactly fine. And she thought that some things don't need a reward. They come back to you not because you deserve them, but because you finally stopped running in the other direction. And that was probably the only kind of grace worth having. If this story touched you, please subscribe, like, and comment. Thank you so much for watching.